Well, this 23-24 championship season is absolutely flying by, isn't it? We're already approaching the second international break of the season, but before that, we've got one more full fixture list to predict. Today, we will run through all 12 fixtures for matchday 11, and we'll give you our scores and why we've gone that way. And of course, as always, I'll encourage you to do the same down in the comments. Let me know what your score predictions are for this weekend. And if you beat or match my score, you'll get a shout out in the recap at the start of the next episode in 2 weeks' time after the international break. But before we head into this weekend's fixtures, we've of course got to have a little look back at midweek and see how we all got on. And I think if I put my scores up on the screen for you here, you can see it was a story of two halves. A very poor Tuesday night followed by an excellent Wednesday night, and it was almost even better. However, I did manage to pick up 11 points in the end, and look at the difference those perfect scores make. A 1-0 win for Leeds against QPR, albeit almost threatened by a controversial late red card, and a 2-0 Sunderland win against Watford after Valerian Ismail had signed his new contract. The rest of the scores though, the final one got the match day away from me. I pick up 11 points with 5 other correct outcomes. You'll see what I mean in a minute, because matching me on 11 was Chris, who beat me in both predictions last week. Well done to you. You got perfect scores for Coventry and Leicester, and also joined me on 11 points. But 2 people beat me this midweek. Firstly, W&G fan, 12 points, and that 95th minute winner for Bristol City gave me an extra point, but you an extra 3, and took you ahead of my midweek score. For Patrick, you also got 12 points, Coventry and Sunderland the correct scores for you, and by courtesy of an extra perfect score, you are the winner for our predictions in matchday 10. So well done to you, and to both of the others who are beating or matching my score. But let's move on to matchday 11, because it's the last round of fixtures before the international break, and we start with a big game in the West Midlands on Friday night. It is Birmingham City versus West Bromwich Albion, and this one is more interesting than it might have been a week ago. Why? Because West Brom have got back-to-back wins, including that 4-0 thumping of Preston last weekend, then a very good 1-0 against Sheffield Wednesday, which ultimately paid for Xisco's job. An early goal, a dominant display, and if we're being honest, the only worry for West Brom from that game and for Carlos Corberán is how on earth they only scored 1 goal. I think by the Opta stats, they had 5 clear-cut chances, they had 17 shots, only hit the target 3 times, which is a worry. And you look at a few of the chances they missed in the highlights, and you'd really expect some of them to be put away. But it's back-to-back wins, it's 5 without defeat, 4 clean sheets in that time as well. And they were coming up against a Birmingham side that didn't win for the whole of September. But boy, did they make up for it to start October. A 4-1 win at home to Darren Moore's Huddersfield. A very good performance, some good goals as well. And good to see a mix of January signings and young superstars amongst the goals. James getting one off the bench, Dembele with a brace as well. And although it was a much more even game on paper than the scoreline would have you to believe, Birmingham have developed that bit of a ruthless edge, which, to be fair, they showed in August, had a little dip from, but now after 2 blanks in a row, they'll be delighted to get 4 goals. For me, this is 2 sides that will be confident after midweek. It's a Birmingham side that is normally pretty solid defensively at home. You look at their last 3 at home in the league, they've only let in 2 goals. West Brom have been better defensively themselves, but maybe don't take as many chances as they create. And as a result of that, I'll probably go for West Brom to edge the balance of the game, but maybe to take less chances. And as a result of that, we'll go for a 1-1 draw. We'll start, yet again, with the Championship's favourite scoreline. Let's move on to a big game in the North East on Saturday lunchtime. It is Sunderland versus Middlesbrough. Sunderland backed up that 3-0 win away at Wednesday with a 2-0 comprehensive home win against Watford. It was a dominant performance. It's probably as comfortable a week as Sunderland are going to get in the Championship. And while Watford did have a bit of the ball and a few chances, they didn't really offer a lot. Let's be honest about it. For Borough, much the same. They won at Watford at the weekend, of course, and backed it up with a 2-0 home win against Cardiff. Mercifully, a first league clean sheet of the season, and Latilaf starting to find some form up front. Isaiah Jones back in the goals again, and a really comfortable, dominant performance, which is much more like what we used to see from Michael Carrick's side last season at home. So this one again is a pretty tricky one to predict. It obviously is an ideal one for the fans being local at a 12:30 kickoff, but I feel that this one is going to be edged in favour of the home side. I just feel over the season they've offered a bit more. Borough won't come and sit behind the ball, I wouldn't think. They won't try and play for a clean sheet just because they've picked up their first one. And Sunderland, they've struggled with that a bit more, as we saw against Cardiff, and we saw at times last season. So against a more expansive Borough side, I'd expect Sunderland to be a threat on the counter. And although I think this will be a good game and a close game, and it's great to see Borough hitting form again, I do think Sunderland will edge this one, and I'm going to go by 2-1. Let's go to the 3 p.m. kickoffs, and we start at the Cardiff City Stadium. It is Cardiff versus Watford. I think we were all a little bit worried when we saw the club statement icon from Watford last week, but surprisingly, Valérien Ismaël was offered a new deal. Last season, Rob Edwards sacked after 10 games with the club in 7th place after a tricky start. Well, this season they're in 21st and they've given the manager a new deal. Very surprising, not just given the results, but actually some of the performances too. They've alluded to the fact that they're doing a lot of work off the pitch in terms of the culture, gutting the squad, and maybe trying to build a better longer-term project there. But you just worry about the here and now, because Watford should not be at that end of the table. All jokes aside, as a Luton fan, they've got a squad that should be far nearer the top half. For Cardiff, yes, a blip in the road against Borough, but a very good few weeks overall. Wins against Coventry, Rotherham and away at Sunderland have made it a pretty good month for them. And while they've had injuries in recent weeks, which is something we alluded to pre-season, have they got the depth if they sustain injuries in the long term? We knew the players they'd brought in an attacking sense were a bit of a risk. The likes of Aaron Ramsey haven't got great injury records, and it's proving the case at the moment. However, at home, they're always a strong opposition. They're pretty good defensively at their own stadium as well. Ignore the Coventry game a few weeks ago. So I am going to bank on them against a largely toothless Watford side that is a bit vulnerable at the back to nick a home win. I don't think it's going to be glitz and glamour. I don't see any route for this being game of the weekend. But I'm going to go for Cardiff to nick an ugly home win. I'm going to go by 1-0. Let's move on to a game I think will be far more entertaining. It is Coventry City versus Norwich City. Yes, Coventry had a pretty important 1-0 win at home to Blackburn in midweek, but generally, these two sides have had goals galore at both ends this year. Norwich, yes, in front of goal, they've dried up a little bit since Sargent's injury, and they'll be disappointed by another defeat on the road with a late goal conceded against Swansea. But overall, they can't really have a complaint. The back four looks vulnerable. They're conceding far too many chances. And for whatever happens at the other end with Norwich, we saw it earlier in the season where they could score 3s and 4s in a game. They're giving up so many opportunities. And for any side with attacking intent, and particularly sides at home who are on the front foot, all they've got to do is create a few chances and they're bound to score against this team. So I do worry for Norwich on the road in particular, but Coventry haven't been great defensively. That also was their first clean sheet in the last 6, that 1-0 win in midweek. It was an important performance and it's back-to-back wins. And just like that, Coventry are right on the cusp of that playoff mix again. Also important to see Haji Wright getting a goal late on in that match. Had a bit of a slow start, but is now starting to get going. And with Ellis Sims scoring at the weekend, right in midweek, you're starting to see those replacements for Gyökeres in the long term for Coventry City. Bit of a worry that the skipper went off in the first half, but hopefully that won't be too long term. For this one, no, I think it's going to be raining goals at Coventry City. I hope I'm not going to be disappointed because we are having a laugh about it, but most thrillers I've predicted this year have been awful. I'm going to go for goals in this one. You look at Norwich's scorelines and you can't see anything else, particularly away from home. I don't think they'll let in 6 this time, but I do think they're going to be on the wrong side of it. I'm going for Coventry 3, Norwich 2. Let's move on to a game between 2nd and 3rd, but that probably doesn't tell the whole story. It is Ipswich Town versus Preston North End. Preston have lost their unbeaten record in style in the last week, losing their last 2 matches by 7-0 on aggregate. And Ipswich have continued their unbeaten run as they won 3-0 against Hull, a game that myself and even some of the Ipswich fans in the comments thought might be a bit of a banana skin for them. It's probably a game where the stats don't tell the whole story because that would suggest it was pretty even. I think Hull had the clear-cut chances listed and they probably should have scored 1 or 2. If you look at most of the Ipswich home games this season, you've had 3-2s, 4-3s, whatever, and that probably would have been a more reflective scoreline. But going forward, Ipswich are irresistible at home. They made Hull look defensively average and they'd only conceded 9 in 9 championship games prior to that. This is an Ipswich side that going forward are flamboyant, are great to watch. And if you're at Portman Road now, after some of the football you saw in the championship before where you were having to cling on a lower budget, to watch this style of football must be brilliant. So enjoy it. It's brilliant to watch. And at home, they're always going to be a threat. For Preston, Look, I mentioned this in the comments a bit, and we've been having this chat with the Preston fans as well. I know it was a friendlier start on paper, and I kept saying it when you were at the top, but this is where the real test comes. Defeat against West Brom, defeat against Leicester, and let's be honest, you were never in the Leicester game. It was a very convincing one. Yes, you were trying to be a bit more cautious, not having the ball. Leicester didn't create bundles of openings, but they've got that ruthless edge, and it was not a tactic that was probably ever going to be successful. I did feel that Preston had to get the first goal in that game, and in the end, they only managed a one shot on target, so that was always going to be unlikely. For Ipswich, they're on the crest of a wave at a minute. It is going to hit a little hurdle at some point. It's not going to be plain sailing forever, but given the week these two have had, given the form Ipswich are in and at home at the moment, I just wouldn't back against them again. So I'm going to go for Ipswich to win this one pretty comfortably by 2-0. Preston haven't shown an attacking threat at the minute. They're going to sit behind the ball, and unless they get caught early on the counter, probably going to be a home win. As we move through the fixtures, the next two look like potential home bankers to the bookies as well. We start with Leeds United versus Bristol City. Leeds got that 1-0 win against QPR in midweek. Let's get the instant out of the way. It wasn't a red card for Begovic. Yes, Bamford didn't cover himself in glory, but let's also be fair to an extent. The kid's had a horrible injury record. He didn't appeal for anything. He tried to tell the referee he didn't get fouled, and he didn't go down feigning injury or anything. So it was just a genuine mistake. Begovic's red card should be rescinded, but I think for Bamford, the pylon's been a little too much, even though it didn't cover himself in glory. Overall, though, an important win for Leeds. It's exactly the type of game I expected. QPR didn't even come out when they went 1-0 down. And yes, there is a bit of a worry at the minute that Leeds aren't taking all those chances they're creating. It was important after that long unbeaten run was ruined by Southampton that they bounced back both with a clean sheet and with a win as well. And they've done that to go back in the top 6. For Bristol City, well, they left it late, didn't they? It took them 80 minutes to break Rotherham down, and then they ruined it within a few, albeit they held on to the lead for longer than my Luton Town did in midweek, so no criticism there. But Tommy Conway, star of the show late on. Rotherham didn't create many chances against them, and on the balance of play, I would say Bristol City just edged the game. But 2-1 win, another decent result, and they're well in that mix early in the season. It is important they bounce back again after that result against Stoke, and of course back-to-back defeats with the Leicester game as well. But the manner of that Stoke defeat, it was important to get the win, and it was a really good result for them in the end. This game, though, is probably going to be a bridge too far. I think we saw how Bristol City are going to set up from the Leicester game. I don't think they'll do anything differently. Yes, Leeds occasionally give teams a chance on the counter, but at home this year, certainly since the transfer window shut, they have looked so solid defensively at home. It's 3 clean sheets in succession. Yes, they've struggled to break teams down at times, but I do feel they're going to get a couple in this one. The movement and the pace Leeds have in attacking areas is probably a bit of a nightmare for Bristol City. You saw where the penalty came from against Leicester. You saw where a couple of the struggles came from against Stoke. I could see it being similar here. So I'm going to go for one more than Leeds got in midweek. I'm going to go for a 2-0 home win at Ellen Road. Let's move on to the other home banker, which is Leicester City versus Stoke City. Leicester, another comprehensive win. Not the most fluent and free-flowing display because obviously Preston was sitting very deep behind the ball, but they dominated possession, they found a way through, and they showed that ruthless edge yet again. Great to see Kiernan Dewsbury Hall doing well. He continues to be one of the stars of the season there. And they've just got quality everywhere, haven't they? You've got Vardy in the team. Oh, he doesn't score? We'll bring Iheanacho on to do the same. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Leicester, as it stands, are going to win the league because Maresca's learned his lesson from Parma, and I worried that he wouldn't. So I have to give him some big credit for that so far. The signs are very good. For Stoke, defeat at home to Southampton, albeit a narrow one. Bit of a frustrating one, wasn't it? Because it was an even game. They conceded from a free kick. And again, although Southampton just had the better chances, they were in the game. And on another day, they might have nicked something. But yet again for Stoke City, after that positive start, the home form is becoming a concern. Now, we got a little bit excited about it, but the first game was against Rotherham, and maybe that was a false indicator based on what's happened since. But I'd be a little bit worried about their home form now. Thankfully for them, this one's on the road. They're going to have to set up defensively and cautiously, but you look at their defensive record in recent weeks. I mean, the 4 before Southampton, they conceded 2-2, 3-2. They lost 1-0 at Norwich when trying to play cautiously as well. So you just feel Leicester have got too much quality and they'll find a way through eventually. Again, it's one of those, a bit like the whole game for Leicester. if that away side can nick the first goal, it makes it tricky. But there's not been many times that's happened this year. So as a result, I'm going to go for Leicester to win comfortably, this time by 3-0. Off to the Den, where these two had a very contrasting midweek experience. Millwall versus Hull City. Millwall bounced back from that defeat against Swansea with a really good win away at Plymouth. Fleming got the crucial opening goal and Saville obviously added one in stoppage time, but they just soaked up pressure in that game. Yes, Plymouth had a lot of the ball. They had loads of shots, loads of chances. We've seen that in most of their home games this year. But we know Plymouth do offer opportunities at the back, and if you can stand firm and if you can maintain a threat on the counter, you're always going to have a chance against them this year. For Millwall, that little bit of quality showed. They managed to get the victory. Wasn't a vintage performance, but a very good away win, and so crucial after that terrible defeat at home to Swansea. For Hull, I really expected more in midweek. I thought they were going to set up well defensively, but the truth is after 5 minutes it was ruined. They were a goal down. Ipswich then created good chances against them, and as always, Hull aren't great at taking their chances either. So a good start to the season, but a bit of a worrying display there. There won't be the first or last side to concede multiple goals against Ipswich away from home this year though. So again, don't want to read too much into that result. It is going to be a much tighter game this, and you've seen Hull this season. Their goal difference is +2. Lots of their games have ended in draws, and I'm going to go safe again with this one. I've not got many in here this weekend, but the Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1. Let's move on to the side who lost to Millwall in midweek. It is Plymouth versus Swansea. Plymouth Argyle defeated 2-0 at home to Millwall, and again, huffed and puffed without really having a major threat. You look at the last 5 games in the Championship, they've let in 11 goals, and they're going to have to tighten up a little defensively. They're playing nice, expansive football, but how many victories is that going to yield against good Championship sides once they get settled and get going? I'm not too sure. Their home form, though, has been alright this year. It's 3 wins and 2 defeats, and they'll be hoping to add to that, but it's against an informed Swansea side who, after disappointment in the derby, seem to have been sparked to life. It is 10 points in 4 games, 3 wins in a row. Okay, Millwall and Norwich were out of form at the time, and Sheffield Wednesday have been hopeless this year. But Swansea are starting to find their feet, and they're starting to adapt to Michael Duff's style of play, and he's proven that he can do a job at multiple clubs in multiple different ways. Another late goal in this one, and a great moment for Bashir Humphreys, his first senior goal. Away to Plymouth though, it's going to be a very different type of game. We know Plymouth are going to have a lot of the ball, they're going to be very aggressive going forward, but Swansea have got the players to hurt on the counter, and this game could be set up for them. There's part of me that thinks Swansea are going to catch them and make it 4 in a row, but this is my one of the weekend. I've always got one where I feel there's a bit of a hunch for someone, and I just feel Plymouth are going to win this game. I can't put logic behind it. If I was going logically and on the form book, I'd probably go for a 2-1 Swansea win. I've got a real strong feeling that Plymouth are going to turn up in this one, and that maybe they're going to take their chances. So as a result of that, my surprise of the weekend perhaps is a Plymouth 3-1 win at home to Swansea. Sorry to the Swansea fans. Let's move down to London, where QPR host Blackburn Rovers. QPR, I would like to hope, will be with the services of Asmir Begovic, who was sent off late on against Leeds. I think we've all established there was no contact in that challenge, albeit, and this bit has been glossed over a little, what on earth he was doing I don't know, flying out of his box with his leg in the air. I mean, even if he caught the man the ball or whatever, it's rash goalkeeping from a very experienced campaigner. And albeit it was only a 1-0 defeat at Leeds and it's probably damaged imitation, it is a worrying run for QPR now. 5 games without a victory, albeit they've played the likes of Coventry and Sunderland at home. Birmingham and Leeds are tricky away games, but this is the sort of game where you've got to bounce back, isn't it? Blackburn are not in great form themselves, but again, you look at the 4 games they've lost in a row in the league. Coventry, Leicester, Ipswich, Sunderland. That's 2 of last year's playoff teams in the top 2. It's a very horrible run of fixtures. The big problem for Blackburn this season has been giving up too many chances and remarkably not taking some of the best chances you'll see all season. They actually did okay against Leicester last weekend. I watched it on the telly, but again, didn't look tight enough defensively and wasted opportunities. And it was a similar story against Coventry. They probably had the best chance of the match. They had a lot of the ball. They had just as many attempts as Coventry, but again end up on a losing side. And that is going to be the problem. Blackburn are a decent side between the 2 boxes, but in those 2 18-yard boxes at the minute, they're all over the place. They've lost their goalkeeper and their star striker from last year, and it does show in those crucial moments. So If QPR are going to pick up a win, this is probably a chance for them to do so. I've got a feeling it'll actually be quite an open game. It will be a bit of a clash of styles. Blackburn trying to play through QPR, QPR trying to get up to the front line as quickly as possible, and both sides will be susceptible to the opposing style of play. If Blackburn can take some of their chances this week, I'm going to bank on this to be an entertaining one, but I'm going to go ultimately for the two sides to cancel each other out. And at Loftus Road, I'm going to predict a 2-2 draw. Let's get on to the penultimate game, which is managerless Sheffield Wednesday against Huddersfield Town. At the time of recording, Xisco has been sacked, no replacement has come in, and I'd be very surprised if there were one before the international break. Sheffield Wednesday lost 1-0 at West Brom as their awful winless start continues, and Huddersfield, after a promising couple of games, were pretty dismal away at Birmingham. Again, maybe the scoreline doesn't tell the whole story. It was a far more even game than was suggested, but they conceded so early, and then for the second to come just as they were getting back into the game. Ultimately, it was a very frustrating day for them and not good enough defensively. But it did create chances and are still looking okay going forward, so it's not all doom and gloom there. For Sheffield Wednesday, no wins this season. I'm going to say this fairly here, and we said it from the very start of the season in both predictions and the manager special. Xisco didn't have a great chance of succeeding. Yes, I would have expected his side to be a little better defensively than they have been, because he does generally set his teams up quite cautiously. But it's a Sheffield Wednesday team where recruitment was delayed. There's not much energy in the team, which is going to be a crucial part of the championship season. And ultimately, they're just getting overrun by a lot of very decent championship teams. Particularly away from home, they're really struggling to stay in games. At home, yes, they had the draw against Borough, but then when you play against sides that are good on the counter like Sunderland, you're just getting overrun. I'll be really interested to see who goes in there. At the moment, 3 or 4 candidates that can't really be separated, so we'll wait and see who turns up. Keep your eyes peeled for a manager special on that front during the international break. For this game, though, do you know what? I'm kind of wondering whether Xisco going, maybe the fact that there's a little bit of change will cause a bit of a reaction. For Huddersfield, yes, they're going to create chances. I'd actually written for Wednesday to nick this one, but I'm changing my mind again now. I did it with one game last week, and I think it actually worked out, didn't it, at the end with Bristol City? So I'm going to go for it in this one as well. I'm going to go for Huddersfield to nick this, and I'm going to go by 2-1. It is exactly the same change I made with that other fixture in midweek. Let's hope it gets me a point or 3. And the final game before the international break is another one that on paper you'd have as a home banker. It is Southampton versus Rotherham United. Two sides expected to be fighting at different ends of the table. And for Southampton, mercifully a good week for them. Back-to-back wins against Leeds and Stoke. A clean sheet against Stoke as well. Absolutely remarkable. Ultimately, the Stoke game was won by a free kick and there wasn't a huge spark throughout the game. But after the few weeks they'd had prior, it was important to get the wins and it was really important to get a clean sheet at the back. For Rotherham, I don't know what more we can cover about their away form. Losing in the 95th minute at home is going to be costly for them because with their current away form, they're going to have to pick up results at home. But they've looked dismal every time they've stepped away from the New York Stadium. They didn't manage a shot on target against Cardiff. They couldn't score against Millwall and Huddersfield. And they're conceding bucket loads as well. They've let in 13 on the road, which only Norwich have got a worse record. They've scored the least away from home with just 2. And they've not picked up a point. And they're the only side in that boat away from home. So I think we know this is a bit of a home banker on paper. Ultimately, for me, it's what score will it be? I'm going to trust Southampton not to make mistakes at the back this time and to dominate their way to a 3-0 victory, which could put them up in the playoffs by the international break. With that out of the way though, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for in matchday 11. And actually, a lot of home dominance. The one that I changed my mind on with Huddersfield at Sheffield Wednesday is the only away win I'd gone for. So without that, it would have been none all weekend. I'm starting with the Championship's favourite scoreline, and I've got all 3 relegated clubs, Leeds, Leicester and Southampton, to win very comfortably at home. I'm banking on Ipswich to keep that gap between 2nd and 3rd as well. Do you agree or disagree with my predictions? Let me know in the comment section down there and give me your predictions for matchday 11. As I mentioned before, if you do beat or match my score, you'll get a shout out in a recap before matchday 12. That will be in around 2 weeks' time after the international break. If you're stuck for content though, don't worry. We had our Premier League preview yesterday, full predictions there, as well as a preview of Luton v Spurs. that's up in the eye above. There's plenty of football chat on Twitch. You can find that channel up there as well. And we should have a manager special from Sheffield Wednesday once they appoint their new man. So if you enjoyed this one and want to stay up to date with all of that, then please do put a thumbs up on the video and subscribe down below for regular content. Thank you very much for watching as always and getting involved in your numbers. We really do appreciate it. We'll see you back here after the international break for more predictions from the Championship.